Well, good morning, and I guess welcome to another weather installment here this morning. I'm going to start with a real brief review of the last week where we've been, and the general tendency for last week in most of the state was fair, mostly dry, and a little cooler than normal. Our mean temperatures in the right side here actually averaged out a couple degrees below normal for the week, especially later in the week. Rainfall was highly variable, but most areas of the state have been falling behind normal in terms of the rainfall accumulations. One notable exception here, west central parts of the state, Mason, Oceana counties, Manistee counties, picked up some significant rain. And actually, this particular graphic here only goes through yesterday, which does not reflect some of the rainfall which fell late last night. There was actually some heavy weather that moved into that part of the state, but that was the exception. Most of the rest of the state, especially the northern, eastern portions of the southern lower here, have really trailed off, and our precip totals for the previous week generally less than a half an inch, in some cases less than a quarter of an inch. In terms of degree day accumulation, base 50 in the lower left here, and this is a reference. It starts on the 1st of May, and of course this year. That was a pipe dream with getting anything in the ground, but it does give us a little bit of an idea of where our heat accumulations are this particular year. And even with the slightly cooler than normal week that we've had here, at least in southern parts of the state, we're at or even maybe just a tiny bit ahead of normal in terms of heat accumulation. But as you go north in the state, into the central and certainly into the northern lower and into the upper peninsula, there we remain significantly behind in terms of degree day units, in some cases more than 100 to 150 units behind normal. Converting that to calendar time, we'd still be, at least in the far northern part of the state, we're still running almost probably a full calendar week behind where we should. So that's sort of where we are right now. Looking ahead here, I did the growing story, and I alluded to this earlier, but and not just in Michigan, but in large areas of the central and eastern Corn Belt, the developing story here really has been from going from way too much water, as we had earlier in the season, the spring, into the early summer, to too little. And on the left-hand side here, I've taken a regional plot. This is looking at the last 30 days from, well, the 8th of July through the 6th of August, and percent of normal precipitation. And in that, you can see large areas of really the central Corn Belt and then eastward and northeastward into Michigan, where we've had, in most cases, certainly less than 75%, and in some cases less than half of normal precipitation. And of course, and on the right-hand side here, this is a running total with observed accumulated precipitation on the top, and then the normal accumulation of precipitation on the bottom. This is for Muskegon in the west central part of the state, but I think it's fairly representative. Overall, you can still see that this one goes back to 90 days, actually, to the first week of May, and you can see for that time frame we still do have the green here indicates a surplus of about 3 inches, but most of that occurred early in this period. And if you look at the latter part of this, especially from the early part of July, you can see that the running observed total of precipitation basically is lagging behind the normal accumulation that we would see, or at least what climatology would tell us. And again, it suggests that we have really, since the early part of July in some parts of the state, a little bit more recently in others, but we have been running behind normal in many parts of the state. And one of the issues, of course, is the phenological stage of the crop. And most of the corn crop here has recently, or is still currently, going through into silk, moisture-sensitive stages, early pod set on soybeans. And these are stages that do matter when we don't have as much water as we would like. And this is certainly a concern, as I mentioned, regionally. Parts of Illinois, Iowa, Indiana have been in a similar type of situation. They're a little bit further along than we are. But again, given the time of the year, it is something that needs to be watched or monitored. Looking ahead here for forecast, this morning we have a cool front. It's the blue line here moving through the state, and there are still a few showers ahead of this in far southeastern parts of lower Michigan. This particular front did set off quite a bit of actually some severe weather to our north and west, some of it even in the UP and into far northwestern lower Michigan late last evening, and then it spread south and east, but it's generally dissipated as the front has moved through. And I guess I'd say this is probably one of the most significant weather systems that we're likely to have here for the next several years, because we're looking at most likely another fair, relatively cool week. And while we do have the chance for some showers to redevelop this afternoon, especially in southern and eastern portions of the state, that would be an exception. And most areas will be dry. We'll see our wind shift around to the west. And then a big area of high pressure, you can see that here just across the Canadian border. That's going to be our major weather feature here for the next few days. And it is a Canadian origin air mass, and it will be bringing slightly cooler temperatures. So we will see for the next week likely our mean temperatures probably average like they had last week, probably a couple of degrees below the normal. But there are changes indicated beyond that. For our weather map here tomorrow, Friday at 8 a.m., the high pressure moves in. Beautiful, beautiful day across Michigan and almost all of the Great Lakes region. And the same will be true on Saturday as well. There is a chance overnight Saturday into Sunday we could see a few isolated showers develop in parts of the state. But again, that's by far the exception rather than the rule. The vast majority of the state will, and really the region for that matter, will remain dry. Probably after today, and for some spots overnight Saturday, the next chance really for anything significant in terms of precip probably not coming until at least Tuesday of next week. Right now it does look like we will have a couple day opportunity for rainfall the middle of next week, but it is going to be a relatively dry week. So when we look at our rain gauge here, predicted or estimated potential here for the next 7 days, you can see in Michigan, generally less than a quarter of an inch is indicated. So in those areas that are really seeing some of the signs of lack of moisture right now, probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. Not much, at least not in the short term here. One positive thing to note on that would be, again, the temperatures will be looking at high temperatures generally over the next several days from the mid and upper 70s to maybe the low 80s in the south. So again, close to a couple degrees below normal. Nighttime temperatures will fall back to the 50s to maybe the low 60s as we move into early next week. So there is our potential evapotranspiration rates will be a little bit lower or less than they would be if we had heat here. But again, mostly a fair, cool, and dry week looking here ahead. In our 6 to 10, our medium range forecast guidance, our 6 to 10 day guidance is completely consistent with this outlook that you've just seen. Our jet stream pattern, that's here on the left side here, generally becoming more west to east. Recently, we've had more of a northwesterly flow across Michigan and the Great Lakes region, which has led to this, again, slightly cooler and drier than normal conditions. That's expected to moderate here by the middle of the month, but with this, especially for the, I would say for the end of the second week, the 13th, 14th, 15th, we probably will still be looking at a little bit cooler than normal mean temperatures. You can see precipitation here is forecast to vary. This is, you have to use a little bit of a grain of salt with this. My own take on this would be if I would have made this forecast, I would have probably said normal to below normal precipitation totals for this time frame. Again, the 13th through the 17th. I am including the 8 to 14 day here as well because there are changes suggested by our medium range guidance. And if you look at the jet stream flow forecast for that third week of August, it looks a lot like what we just saw, but there's a little bit more there's a ridge building here over the middle of the country. And with that, I think that this is a good forecast. With that, we will see a return of probably of above normal temperatures. And that is indicated here, which I think is an important shift or change. Precipitation totals could be anywhere. They have us here in this transition area from below normal or drier than normal in the far eastern and southern part of the state to above normal in the far northwest. That's probably splitting hairs. We don't have that much accuracy, but I would think that we would see a little bit of moderation in terms of, well, certainly in both in terms of temperatures and in terms of precipitation. But I think the big news is that we probably will be seeing warmer temperatures here by the second half of August. And with that, a reminder, I'm not sure how well, summary-wise here, again, for the next week, fair, cooler, a little cooler than normal, mostly dry with it's temperatures not too far away from the normals, but the medium range forecast guidance, once again, a continuation up until about the middle of the month, and then probably some warmer weather here coming for the latter part of the month. I'd like to end here. I do have an example there. Well, obviously a great deal of concern this year, given the late planting on where crops are phenologically, and when do we have our first freeze. One of the rules is, and I'll say this probably many times before the end of the growing season, unfortunately there's just really no way to time or to have an accurate forecast of when first freezing temperatures of the fall occur. It's something that usually develops. It's a meteorological versus a climate type of thing, and with any skill, maybe out a week in advance, maybe 10 days at the top, looking at jet stream patterns, but it's a really difficult thing to do. So the best thing we can do right now, looking at this, is looking at climatology and when have first freezing temperatures of the fall occurred in the past. That gives us a good idea. And there is a few years ago, I was part of a project, the USDA-funded project called Useful to Usable, or U2U. It was a group of a large number of land grants in the Midwest, led at Purdue, but included MSU, and we came up with a number of different applications using climate information to try to help with management. This is my favorite one. I think it's a really good one. But in this example, and the URL for this particular application is down here at the bottom. It's actually hosted by the Midwest Regional Climate Center at the University of Illinois now, and it will be. But what it allows you to do here basically is to, there's a user information required here. It's looking at corn growth, development, and degree day accumulation, and that's one of the major functions of this. And so it asks the user for a planting date, and I used an example here. It also allows you to do this anywhere in the Midwest by county. And I've chosen Ingham County here to be representative, so we'll just call it East Lansing here. I used a planting date for June 1st, which in Michigan this year was a little bit on the front end of some of the planting. Some of it was even later than this. And what I've given here are two different examples. I have on the left hand, I have a full season hybrid, 105 maturity days. And on the right side, I've done the same thing. Everything is the same, except I've used a short season, a 90-day maturity day hybrid, to show you, but basically using past climatology to look at what has happened in previous years. It goes all the way back to 1981 and up through, basically I ran this yesterday, so it's to the 7th of August, which is where this red line is here, and it looks at running accumulation of degree days, and then where do you end up at the end of the season based on past climatology. And for these particular examples, what you really want to pay attention to here is looking out in, so you've got your date here on the horizontal axis, accumulation of degree days on the y-axis. And so what is important here is in this darker gray area. This is what happened during the last roughly 40 years with your degree day accumulation. Very important, the black line up on here on top is physiological maturity, at least for that type of a hybrid. And what you can see here, at least in looking at the past, is that our full season hybrid, our variety here that was planted again on the 1st of June, some of the years it does not meet the full GDD requirement for that particular hybrid. In contrast, our short season hybrid is able in most of the years to make it. There's one other very important part of this particular application, and that is over here on the far right. It also gives you an idea of when the first freezing temperatures of the fall. You can specify that either 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I've chosen 28 to make it a hard freeze, and it shows you here in blue the statistical frequency of those events and what days they occur. And so here in Ingham County, East Lansing, Michigan, South Central Lower, the average for the average first 28 degree morning in this part of the world is the 18th of October. That's at least, but it can vary from late September here in the earliest all the way into late November. So it gives you an idea of the statistics, and then it also allows you to see, well, where is my degree day accumulation at relative to the calendar? Am I liable or am I more likely to make it? And again, with this example, with a short and a full season cultivar, you can see that the short season, it's still looking pretty good. Given where we've been up until now, it's going to be a little bit more dicey for a full season cultivar, but that's where many of our growers are and what they face, and some people even, of course, planted later than this. But this example, I think it does help to add some information, some objective information into a very, very challenging and tricky situation to give you a bit of an idea about where you might be finding your crop here in the next several weeks. And with that, I'll wrap up and stop. I apologize for going over, but I did want to share this example here. And again, if you have questions, I can help with that. But the URL here, it's an easy application to use. And again, it doesn't matter where you are. It covers the entire Midwest, the entire Great Lakes region and Michigan. You just add your location and the information, and off you go. So Mike, I'll turn it back. See if anyone has any questions. Turn it back to you.
Jeff, there was a couple of questions in there, but you addressed them. They dealt with the corn phenology model that you just discussed. And
good.
So, no, that's really important information. Very welcome and very much needed this year. I did want to mention that there is also, and I'll probably write an article for MSUE News on it, just introducing it. Jeff was real instrumental in bringing a program, a phenology model from the University of Nebraska over to Michigan. And it does the same thing. It uses Michigan weather data and actually predicts your growth stages for soybeans planted at different dates and different maturities and different locations in the state. So that might be something that's useful. It's actually an irrigation program is why it was created, but built within there is a crop growth stage model. So that can be very helpful for soybeans. The growth stage that you're looking for on the soybean model is R7. Once the beans reach R7, they're basically immune from damage from frost. Most literature says that. There might be a 5% yield loss at the worst case scenario in some fields. But once you hit R7, basically one mature pod on 50% of the plants in the field, your chances of having frost induced yield losses is very, very low. All right, if there's no other questions, I really appreciate everybody hanging on for a little bit longer. I think it was really important information. Again, just encourage you to fill out the survey that's in the chat pod. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week.